The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hey, this is Matt Landry, the voice of Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars The Clone Wars. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars. This is where the fun begins.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away, from movies to books, TV shows, and more. We're looking at the deeper themes and meanings found in the Star Wars universe. Be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Wars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your favorite podcast app, or on the StarQuest YouTube channel. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, on X, where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram, where we are at StarQuest Network. And be sure to get your official Secrets of Star Wars gear at sqpn.com/merch. I'm your host, Patrick Mason, and joining me tonight on the panel is Jeff Haecker. Hey, Jeff, how's it going?
Hey, Pat.
And joining us again is Angela Sealana. Hey, Angela.
Hello, Pat. I felt like I was on, Wheel of Fortune or something game show by saying, hello, Pat. That would be really cool if we did like a game show format for one of our podcasts.
I like it. And I like, yeah, Pat. Yeah.
Star Wars trivia. I'm there.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good future episode. We gotta do that one. All right, so today we are revisiting Rogue One, a Star Wars story, in light of the thrilling tale of Cassian Andor that we experienced through 2 seasons of Andor on Disney+. Rogue One was Disney's first foray into live-action, non-Skywalker-related material. It had a budget of $200 million and made more than $1 billion at the box office, half of that domestically and half internationally. It's remained one of the few non-controversial post-Disney productions, enjoyed by both casual and more fanatical fans. And now it appears that Andor will be joining it in those hallowed halls, of which sadly few shows have made it. So being that we're giant Star Wars nerds, we thought it would be fun to talk about it all, especially since Andor flows into Rogue One, which flows into A New Hope. So let's start there. What do you guys think about the way each piece was done and how it fits into the larger whole?
The larger whole. Yes, I think they did really well. We talked about this in some of our Andor episodes that I was on, that watching the behind the scenes content they gave us for that show, they mentioned, particularly in the music is what I'm thinking about, how they started off the seasons being very electronic sounding, very kind of abstract, experimental, just like when we were on Andor, the first planet that was featured in Andor, which is not coming to my brain at the moment. Ferrix, thank you. And then we went all the way through these seasons to the end of Andor, where it's just before we get to Rogue One, and they intentionally created this slow transition into orchestral music. And I love that, so that if you wanted to watch all of Andor and flow into Rogue One, as you said, Pat, you really could do that and not be jarred by the music. And I think also probably they took into account some of the cinematography for that as well, just looking back at Andor as well as Rogue One, revisiting that recently. So just in those technical senses, I think they did a good job with that. The costumes, I think probably the the age of the actors is a little bit obvious. Just if you watch from one to the next. Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah. But it's not it's not significant to the point where it's like, oh my gosh, there's 50 years in between these or something. Like it's not too bad. So just on the surface, it works. I think in terms of the story and the tone, maybe there is a little bit of a difference there, but honestly, I think it works really well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we've got it's really the actor who portrays Andor that you can kind of tell the age difference. At least in my mind, that's the primary place I saw kind of the age difference coming out. Mm-hmm. But a little bit in Mon Mothma's actor as well. You can kind of tell just a little bit. Although I think they both did a fantastic job of sort of playing the character again several years down the line. So what do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I really love it, how it flows together. The week after the finale happened, I think, I don't know if it was exactly a week, but anyway, I watched the last arc of Rogue One, or I'm sorry, the last arc of Andor again, so the last 3 episodes. And then a couple hours later, I watched Rogue One and then watched New Hope. And it probably started too late because I was starting to nod off by the end, but I wanted to see kind of how it all flows together in one, as one big thing, because it is, especially Andor. We were joking it's Andor, or Rogue One. We were joking as Andor season 3. So I really enjoyed watching it all back to back. And as we'll kind of talk about, there were things in the movie that, like, there were lines that had been seeded throughout Andor, that throughout the whole show that were quoted in Rogue One, and you can imagine Cassian or other characters like thinking back to the first times they heard those lines. And then it was really the end of the movie of Rogue One when when Cassian and Jyn are on Scarif and about to die. Like I really just imagine he's kind of flashing back to like everyone he's lost, and that everyone he may see again in the Force if he believes in some sort of Star Wars afterlife. So, and then of course it goes right into New Hope, which is pretty much all new characters in New Hope from Rogue One. I believe the only continuous ones from Andor, from Rogue One to New Hope are Leia, Vader, and Tarkin. So I think. Well,
you do get R2 and C-3PO. They have like a really quick cameo on Rogue One. Yeah.
Right, and I mean we get references to others like Bail Organa and Kenobi in Rogue One, but it's really those 3 that are kind of the ones that continue into New Hope. So it's almost like, I mean, it is really like a big shift because like the characters of Rogue One and Andor, their story is over for the most part because they all died.
Spoiler.
Spoilers for an almost 10-year-old everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, overall, like if you haven't done that kind of a watch, like if you can't do it all in one day, but if you can do it all like in a near succession, I think it's a fun thing to do. And at some point down the road, I want to do it with like maybe not all in a day, but maybe over a couple days, do this 2 seasons of Andor, then Rogue One, and then New Hope. But
dang.
Yeah, overall it flows, like it really does flow nicely together. I think they did a good job in kind of linking Andor to Rogue One, especially.
That would be very stressful for me. Like Andor season 1 was so stressful. And then the beginning of Andor season 2 was so stressful. So I would need like a really good party. Once you get to the end, it's like, yeah, you would definitely need a New Hope for sure.
Ended on a high note, right? Yeah, it'd be a good weekend, I think. Well, I think, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say Mon Mothma is the only one who appears in all 3. Because you get her in A New Hope.
She's not a New Hope. She was in The Empire Strikes Back.
No, she's in Return of the Jedi. That was her first appearance.
Is he? Okay. That's right. Yeah, because it's General Dodonna.
Dodonna's kind of head.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we get him in Rogue One, but he's not in, and I don't remember seeing him in Andor.
Is he in Rogue One? I don't remember, Dodonna.
I think during the
he
council.
He is, yeah, during the council.
Council meeting.
And also in Andor, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's pretty fantastic from my point of view that you can get such a seamless transition between these, even though the works are decades difference when you talk New Hope to Rogue One, and then even Rogue One to Andor. I mean, you're talking, because Rogue One was 2017?
2016.
2016. So that's almost a decade, not quite. 8 years.
When you look at pre-production and post-production and debut, you probably have more than 10 years, because Andor, I believe they started pre-production for that quite early on, and they were shooting Andor season 1 during COVID for sure. So,
oh yeah, we got that. Because that whole time frame had 3 sets of delays. You had the actors strike, the writer's strike, and then the COVID.
Yeah.
The COVID strike. It was against all of us.
COVID strikes back.
It was, yes.
Yeah, COVID strikes back.
It doesn't.
Yes, yeah. Right. So, it's amazing to me that they pulled off the level of seamless transition that what really gets me is how maybe the first 30 minutes of Andor's actions within those first 30 minutes make complete sense. Like the way he acts, what he does. Like when you first see it, Rogue One on film, and the first time you see Andor, he's kind of he seems like a real wild card, kind of crazy guy who shoots one of his informants within the first 5 minutes of meeting him on the Ring of Kafrene. But when you know all of the backstory, what put him in that spot at that time, you're like, oh, okay. And why he's as frantic as he is, and why he's as kind of up in Jin's face when they've got her back at Yavin and they're talking to her with the rest of the people. And so
he's intense.
Yeah, he's very, very intense. But it's funny because in a lot of Andor, he's not at that intensity for most of it. But by the time you get to the end of Andor, you're like, yeah, that's everything he's doing makes, to my mind at least, makes perfect sense. It also, I think, Andor does a very good job of setting up the temporary group, which is and they did that in part with the 3 arc way they did things, but even with Andor's kind of core group he has throughout the show that he slowly loses by the time we get to the end of Andor. But even, we get the Aldhani team, we get the Gorman team, we get these temporary groups of people that, they do the mission and then they scatter, and lo and behold, most of them don't make it. And you see a couple of them down the line. And we see that throughout Andor. And then we see the exact same thing play out in Rogue One. And then when you get to A New Hope, there's a whole new team taking the baton. And it doesn't strike you as odd, because that's the setup. This is the Rebel Alliance, and that's what happens. So they did a really good job making sure it all flowed together.
Yeah.
So
I think it's definitely one of the best examples of in Star Wars canon, in the Disney canon, of unifying things. Because when Disney bought Star Wars, their whole thing was all the books and everything is going to connect. It's things will be referenced, and they did for a while. But then they started realizing, well, we want to do this idea that was in a book in film, and it's going to contradict the book. And so that's happened a couple times. But I think they did a really good job in keeping these specifically in a way that flows, which is better than there's been minor things. The biggest examples are retconning books, which is, I have no problem with if they want to tell the story on screen, but I do like that they kept it such in a good continuity with everything.
Was there? I mean, this character didn't exist, but most of these characters didn't exist before Rogue One, right? Andor didn't exist before that, did he? or was he? Okay.
No, he was created for the Saw Guerrera existed because he was in the Clone Wars, and then Mon Mothma existed, and the legacy characters of course existed, but for the most part they all were creations for Rogue One.
What? So tell me a little bit about a little bit more about Saw Gerrera, because I gotta finally face the music. I haven't watched all of Clone Wars, and so I haven't seen as much about.
It's a big project.
Yeah. So when I started getting
Star Wars fans,
this is going to be a while.
Yeah, so Saw Gerrera in the Clone Wars is kind of like I don't know how old he's supposed to be, but he's definitely a young adult in the Clone Wars. And he and his sister are, they have, just like so many other people in the galaxy, suffered because of the Empire. And so they want to defend their people, defend their homeland. And so what happens is, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's definitely Kenobi and Anakin, and I want to say Ahsoka as well.
It's kind of the setup is their planet Andor has been taken over by separatists, and they have installed a king that's not the kind of the rightfully. I can't remember if they're an elected king or if it's a genealogical king or whatever, but they've installed a new king that's kind of sympathetic to the separatists, but they're not part of the Republic, so the Republic's loath to get involved. But they send, I don't believe Obi-Wan goes, but it's Anakin and Ahsoka go as kind of observers with a small team of clones, basically to train Saw and his sister in the group as revolutionaries who can lead their own uprising against the separatists.
Right. Yeah, I think I was conflating some of Rebels with my memories of Clone Wars, but essentially, we see Saw kind of as this young upstart guy who kind of has a chip on his shoulder, and then I think his sister ends up getting killed, right?
Yes, his sister does get killed,
and that's when he sort of shifts into this extremist that we end up seeing him as in Rogue One. So that's where we have seen him before, and of course with Andor, his character gets a little bit more, I would say, muscle on the structure, the bones that we have of the character. And I think at least for me, I came away from Andor having a lot more sympathy for Saw Gerrera than even having seen the Clone Wars and his other, appearances, various things that sort of tell you more about his backstory, but understanding that in Andor, there's this scene towards the end where the council, I think, is talking. They're having like a holo call with Saw, and Mon Mothma is really upset. And I think at the end of that, I don't remember who says, I want to say it's not Jimmy Smits Organa, says something like he's insane. And then
I think it's Organa.
And then somebody else is like, no, actually, we've been following him. Like he's legit. Like he's a legitimate leader. Like he knows what he's doing. So I think, you get a lot of a 360 approach to Saw Gerrera with all these different pieces of media, Star Wars media. It's really interesting. I personally, I don't know if I would say I think Saw Gerrera is like one of my favorite characters, but I would say he's definitely still one of the most interesting characters in Star Wars, especially after Andor.
Yeah, and if you there's a recent book that I've referenced before on the podcast, The Mask of Fear. It's like right after the Revenge of the Sith events in Order 66, where Saw has interactions with Bail and Mon, and it's the first book of a trilogy, so there's going to be more. So I'm very interested to read those next couple books when they come out and see, because they're kind of antagonistic at that point, but they're kind of starting to like work together because it's within a year, so their Rebel alliance hasn't been built up yet. There's really not much because everyone thinks or a lot of people think the Empire's going to be okay, so there's not a lot of wide scale or widespread rebellion going on. So there is some of that building up, and so Mon and Bail and Saw do have a long-standing relationship from going back to as early as a year after Revenge of the Sith.
So this has always been the question in my mind, having my primary experience of him be Rogue One and then now Andor, and neither of them really explain the fanaticism of his followers. Does that make sense within the wider body of work, and why?
As far as the fanaticism, I think it's more of like a cult of personality that develops around him, based off of people who see that he gets things done. It's kind of like maybe some political situations throughout history that we've seen where people want a certain agenda accomplished, and they see that there is a figure who is very committed to that particular agenda, and they rally around that person. They create this cult of personality around them. They're kind of like an extreme personality. And I think Saw Guerrera is kind of one of those people. He's sort of blinded by his own personal experiences of warfare and what happened to his sister. And then, of course, he's huffing whatever that gas is.
Yeah. Rilo, yeah. Rilo. But that's like, how much does that have an effect? Does that start? Do they show that in Clone Wars or Rebels when he starts, and does that start the unhingement? Or
no, they don't really show him, because in Rogue One, when we first saw that movie, and he's taking that breath off of his mask, everyone thinks, oh, it's oxygen, but they've since confirmed, no, it's not oxygen, it's the Rito that he's huffing. Yeah, I would agree with Angela that it's really just kind of the cult of his personality, that from everything he's seen, because he starts off, from his very youngest time, like he might have even been 17 or 16, like even a little bit younger, when the events on Andor happened, when he was fighting and then his sister dies, because his sister was kind of elected the leader of that group that's fighting against the separatists, but then she dies. And so from the very early age, he's had that, he's lost people. And then I can't remember where exactly it's talked about, or he talks about it, but from when the Republic took over, when the Republic defeated the separatists and became the Empire, it was more of the same for him. And we even see in Bad Batch, there's an episode where Crosshair leads a team to Onderon to take out some rebels, but it's Saw with a camp of of children and women and vulnerable people that they're sent to take out. So the Empire's been after him, so he's pretty much been fighting his whole life as well. Like the Cassian line is, I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old, and Saw's kind of the same way. So I think it's just the lifetime of fighting and losing people throughout his life has kind of led to that, because he's a little bit more less unhinged in Rebels the first time you see him, and he actually has some, like, because he wants to kill off the last Geonosian, but he kind of lets them go, and then by the time you see him again in Rebels in season 4, he's kind of back to his old ways. So there's definitely, like, now we know it's he has that Rito huffing that's probably affecting his decision making too. So yeah, I think it's just like you said, Angela, just kind of the cult of personality of people drawn to that, who want to just fight the Empire, who are drawn to him, and they're just gonna
and he's effective. I mean, in a certain way, like he's a very effective leader. But he's also, he doesn't really have a morality, I guess, because he's kind of crazy. So, yeah. Well,
and that's, from a live action point, that's exactly the feeling you get in Rogue One, because this guy who is obviously taking his life into his own hands by defecting from the Empire is being treated not very nice by this group of supposed rebels. So, I'm always curious about kind of what's the backstory, and you talk about the book where they talk more about Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, and the sadly deleted scene that I think most of us consider actually probably happened, but it's not technically canon. At the end of that was supposed to be at the end of Revenge of the Sith, right? Where you have Bail Organa and Mon Mothma and Ahsoka meeting up and kind of forming the very that's right, with Padme,
because this was it was taking place during as soon, I think it's right after Palpatine declares the Empire is when they have that meeting.
So what did we think about sadly not Jimmy Smith's Organa, although I think Jimmy did a fine job portraying that character. He was portrayed very well in Andor as well, by a different actor. What do we think about his portrayal? Does it work through everything, even with the actor change? And then Mon Mothma as well. Although you get so much more about her than you do about Bail Organa. But
I think Star Wars fans were craving more about Mon Mothma, right? Because she's such a, I don't know why she's such a, I mean, that sounds kind of weird to say, but I don't know. She has this aura about her that is has been so beloved by Star Wars characters for decades. And I think we all sort of craved more information, like who is she? Where does she come from? Get inside her head, what's going on with her. And we really got that in Andor, definitely in season 2 for sure. And I think one of the things that was interesting to see about Mon Mothma was that she has to go through a trauma in a way. I mean, obviously, she has a lot of hardship that she endures, and we all knew that she made a lot of sacrifices to get where she was. But we see it happen in front of us, and we see how painful it is and how long she has to sort of different levels of pain, different levels of loss, of personal loss, especially, but then just a loss of a certain naivete that she had working in the Senate once she saw the violence in front of her, right? And we all remember that scene from Andor where Cassian is saving her after she makes her big speech in the Senate, and she sees her driver get shot right in front of her face, and she's very impacted by that. She's like, I don't know if I can do this, But I kind of love seeing that, because that was necessary. All those things were necessary for her to get to be the war leader that she is, in the Star Wars content we'd seen before that. So obviously she became a lot more humanized as well when we could connect with the different personal situations that she went through with her daughter, with her husband, with her cousin, with all of her confidants, realizing that they were, I guess, not compromised, but they had different levels of loyalty to various, parties and personal self-interest. And she was so idealistic, and seeing her have all these personal experiences that really allowed us to connect with her on a deeper level. I loved that. And also getting to know her culture more was fascinating too. So I'll be quiet and let y'all talk now.
What did you think, Jeff?
Yeah, no, her portrayal and journey throughout the show is great, and I'm glad they were able to get Genevieve O'Reilly back, because she did portray Mon in that deleted scene in Rogue One, and then I don't think she voiced the character in Clone Wars. I think it was but then she voiced the character in Rebels, and then and then in Rogue One, and then has since been back for Andor and even in Ahsoka. So we're getting kind of this lifetime journey with this, and I don't know if we'll see her as much in the next, batch of content that's coming out in that kind of time frame of Mandalorian and Ahsoka. But I did like that we kind of got her full circle journey in all these things, and even they're filling in stuff in the books, like I've mentioned. So we got new dimensions with her. We didn't know she was married or had a child, and the whole show I was like, oh, are they gonna kill off her daughter, her husband and daughter, and that's gonna be what drives her off to join the rebellion, or like a big factor in that. But luckily they didn't. So maybe we'll see the daughter show up in future things as well. But yeah, no, overall I really liked her journey, and seeing her speech in this, and then being able to watch the Rebels episode where it's like after she's escaped Coruscant and unites the Alliance, and they did change the speech slightly from between Rebels and Andor, but that's fine, because the Andor speech was really good. So
it was better.
It was better. Well, I like to think of it like the Andor speech was like a speech for adults, and the Rebel speech was a speech for kids, and that's fine, because that's how memory works a lot of the time. But I just like, it was just a great, like I said, kind of full circle journey, and then we get to see her in Ahsoka as well, and unfortunately we're seeing, some of the, maybe she's so anti-war now because of what she went through, or so doesn't want to start anything because of how much she went through. So it's giving her dimension, and it's not just, she's just always going to be the same, never have changes to her character. So I do like that, and I'm very interested to see if we do see more of her because I want to say after she's in the Aftermath books, which take place after Return of the Jedi, but before Mandalorian and Ahsoka. I don't believe she's been in anything past that I know of. There's only been a couple books past that, and then the sequel movie she's obviously not in. So I'm curious what they're going to kind of do with her, because it is a little bit different than they did in the old Legends universe of books. I'm trying to remember what happens to her in those books, because
she leads the New Republic for a while, and then I think she gets poisoned and then retires, basically.
I was going to say she just got tired. She got tired of being in danger all the time.
There's that scene in Andor after the 5 or 6 Rebel Alliance people are arguing about whether or not to believe Andor, and she looks at Bail at the end of it. She's like, we thought being in the Senate was hard.
Yeah, it makes being in the Senate look easy, right?
Yeah. So I think it would be hard. Genevieve, I think O'Reilly, she's such a fantastic actor. It would be difficult not to keep using her because of how well she portrayed everything. I think it's interesting. I want to bring up another deleted scene. I don't know if it was full on deleted or was just cut from the script. I don't know if they actually ever shot it, but there was a scene where right before Mon gives the speech, or somewhere in that time frame, she talks to Perrin, and Perrin just lays everything out. He's like, look, the ISB pulled me like every week and drilled me and asked me what was going on, and I knew what was going on, and I didn't tell them anything. And very much casts him in a very different light. kind of honestly kind of how I felt about Perrin for most of the time, because the back of my mind was like, there's no way they're not trying to use him. And if he hasn't given her up, you know, there's got to be something more to him, which was kind of sad, because the final shot we get with him is him and what's his name's wife intoxicated in the car. So,
yeah, but I think that scene was, I don't think they filmed it. I think it was in the script though. So I think they cut it out, but
which is sad, because honestly, I think it would have been I don't think it would have been a portrayal of any of the characters or any of the ideals. I don't think it would have made Mon's sacrifice worse or less. So, very few misses in the show. I think that was one of them. But yeah, seeing Mon Mothma's sort of fleshed out, because we're right. Like she shows up in, the third movie, Return of the Jedi, or sixth movie. And it's this big question mark, like, who is she? What is she about? Why is she there? But she has a gravity about her, and you want to know more. And so, the books, they treat her, at least the ones I read, part of the expanded universe, before it was the, retcon universe. They treated her very delicately. They wouldn't go into her a whole lot, because they kind of wanted to keep the mystique. And I think that was the thing, Andor took her on, and I think they could have done a bad job. Like, you could have messed this up and it wouldn't have been hard to do. The harder thing to do would be to portray her correctly and make the sacrifice look real and sort of build her into it. And I think they did a pretty fantastic job. Even though I felt, and I know some other folks who talked through the shows have felt that, like, in the beginning, it felt like Mon wasn't even part of the rebellion, or like she was just the side character that didn't really matter that much. And it was a real treat to get to watch her evolve into sort of the leader of the rebellion, the face, and watching the other members of the Rebel Alliance / rebellion realize that, like, how important she was, and getting her, the way it gets put, she needed protection, but getting her to the place where she needed to be. So
yeah. I was going to say too, with Bail Organa, I would almost want like a series. I know they gave us a little bit of Bail Organa in the Kenobi series at the end, but I would love to see sort of that transition, that life experience. What was that like for him, behind the scenes as well, realizing that he had to become this underground leader, and how dangerous was it for him? That would be a fascinating series. Even if they bring back Benjamin Bratt for that would be pretty cool to see. So, because we got a little bit of Organa in Andor, which was all, as we've said, enjoyable and interesting, but we didn't get nearly as much detail as we did with Mon Mothma.
Yeah, for more on Bail, read Mask of Fear, the book, because it is, and it would be cool to see that in a series. But they do have some of that in that book, and some of the other books too have been not centric on Bail, but he's been in those, like the Ahsoka novel, which is kind of retconned out nowadays, but that goes into his character. But then the Mask of Fear book really does go kind of into his character. It's interesting because it sets up initially that him and Mon are kind of at odds in the Senate, like not in the sense of they're opposing Palpatine, but they're at least at odds in other ways. Because I don't think Mon, at least at least we don't get it confirmed in the show or Rogue One that she knows, that he's a Sith Lord, like Bail would know, because Bail met with Kenobi and Yoda after that whole, and I mean, Bail was there at Order 66. He saved Yoda, so he knows. I assume that Kenobi and Yoda told him. So, but we don't necessarily know that Mon knows and about that. I think by the time of She probably does. Like they probably had that discussed in a meeting at some point, but we just don't know for sure.
Well, that's an interesting point you make, Jeff, because Bail was raising a force sensitive person, right? Like his daughter was force sensitive, and he had these friends in the Jedi Council who were obviously very force sensitive and in tune with the force. And so he would have been it would make more sense for him to be sort of in touch with like the spiritual reality of what was going on behind the scenes. Whereas with Mon Mothma, we never really got a force connection per se, like any sort of spiritual, besides, her saying like, may the force be with you. Like we haven't gotten anything else from her in that regard. So that's interesting that you mentioned that, because that would make a lot of sense. And to see that I think to see that in live action, that would be really cool.
And we do see her knowing Ahsoka in the series, so she presumably has some knowledge at this point of the Force, or like is more aware of it, and I'm sure she knows all about Luke Skywalker and all that, but it would be cool to see kind of more of that development in between. And if they did like Mothma the series that takes place kind of her journey from between Rogue One to Return of the Jedi, I would watch that. That would be really interesting, and they could do a lot of like it could almost be like the successor to Andor and just be over other characters.
Yeah. So, sorry. I wonder, does the book cover how Bail brings, Leia kind of into the rebellion, or does it all take place kind of before that?
So that one is still very, very, very when she's a baby, because that's like a year, The Mask of Fear. But there is a book, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and it's a YA book about focusing on Leia, but how she kind of discovers what her father's doing and or what her parents are doing, and that they're part of this rebellion. And she kind of like stumbles upon she stumbles upon the base that's in The Last Jedi. I can't remember the name of the planet, but that was an old rebel base that her father had set up. So if you want more on that, it's the YA book Leia, Princess of Alderaan, when she kind of discovers really what her parents are doing.
Okay, because if you're talking about like a live action show, I think that's probably where you would go with that. You would show Bail and Leia and their sort of entrance into leading Leia sort of coming of age into the rebellion. And, Bail, what's going on with Bail's side of the ball while we have all of the Andorian machinations going on throughout the galaxy on the other side of the ball. So,
you do have the young Leia actor from Kenobi that you could that she was one of the better things about that series was her portrayal of Leia. So that would have been really they could bring her in now that this is now a couple years later. You could do something like that. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, if you start shooting in the next couple of years, you could, that all timeline works out. Speaking of the other side of the ball, we also get a lot more of Director Krennic.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I'm looking at the outline. I see what's coming up next. It's so funny. The other side of the ball. Yeah.
The other side of the ball. Yeah, literally. So the other side of the Death Star, the people who won it. We get a significant expansion of Director Krennic within Andor. How did we feel about that? And we spent a lot of time diving into Imperial characters in this, whereas in the vast majority of Star Wars media, we don't spend very much time with the Imperial characters, unless they're, like Finn, where they've defected, something like that. Or I guess Han Solo falls into that realm too. But what do we think about spending so much time with these Imperial characters and how that was done?
Well, my personal take is that in Rogue One, a lot of what we see of Krennic is incompetency. Whereas in Andor, they really took pains to show that the Empire had to have some level of competency to be the menacing threat that they are. And so we see Krennic doing more in terms of the wide scope of bringing about the Death Star, and this one particular project is spotlighted. But I think it gives you a sense that there are a lot other projects that he had to oversee as well to make it happen. And so, he's a little more threatening, I think, in Andor than he is in Rogue One, simply because he is more competent and he has more of a sense of power and influence over those in Andor and the Empire. And so I really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed especially, you know, his relationship with what is her name?
Dedra.
Thank you.
Dedra Meero.
Dedra Meero. Yes. That he really has this. It's almost like Dedra becomes the audience in a sense, and Krennic becomes this scary threat, you know, that could really bite your head off. He has fangs, I guess you could say, in Andor, whereas in Rogue One, I felt like he was sort of like, you know, his claws had been cut in a sense, because you constantly see him being run down by the Imperial authorities that are addressing him in that movie. So that's what I liked about Andor and director Krennic.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean he's the, like, they identified, I think that the Empire, I think, identified Krennic as he's the guy that can get the thing built, but he's not going to be the guy that's going to be in charge of it once it's built. So it's kind of like what we've been saying, is that fascist systems like this, they'll use you till you're useful, and when you're no longer useful, you know, you can be imprisoned or killed, or at least just relegated to, you know, not having any authority. But yeah, I did like his portrayal throughout Andor. I believe I don't think he's in season 1. I think it's primarily season 2 that we see him, and we just get him sprinkled throughout the show. He's never kind of the main antagonist, like it's Partagaz or Dedra who are kind of those roles, but we get him sprinkled in, and he does get kind of very scary, because he's casually talking about, you know, the Gorman genocide in the beginning of season 2, of how they're going to kind of manufacture this, you know, series of events that will lead to them being able to get the mineral they need. And then at the very end, when when Dedra gets in trouble for, you know, having gotten the wrong email, and essentially, and the
opened and read the wrong email attachments, basically.
The scene where he's
unforgivable sin in the Empire.
Yeah. But the part where he's like poking her head, that was actually improvised by Ben Mendelsohn, and I think it, like, that makes it even, like, I mean, that's just terrifying, because, like, you can just imagine someone doing that. Like, that's not something you do to anyone under any circumstance, and it's just such a shocking thing to happen. Like, it almost, like, it's like, oh my gosh, this guy's like, because you know he's building this weapon, but you don't really get a sense of how, like, really deep down kind of evil and, you know, evil he is until, like, he does stuff like that. So I did like that they brought him back for some, you know, some development like that, and you also get some kind of good, you know, back and forth with him and Mon in the party scene. It was Davos Skolin was the guy. Some back and forth.
That was scary too.
Scene. Yeah,
that back and forth.
Yeah. So I'm glad that they got to, like, develop him more in Andor, because he was an original character for Rogue One as well. And there are a couple books that I think it's really one. It was kind of the Rogue One
Catalyst.
I can't remember the name of it offhand. Yeah, Catalyst. Yeah, he was in that. It's been a while since I've read it, so I don't remember all the details. But he was in that, and you get more of his relationship with Galen Erso. Because the first time you see him in Rogue One, he's showing up and, you know, kidnapping a guy and killing his wife and trying to find and, you know, kidnap his kids so that he can
burning his farm. because as an Imperial, if you can, you have to burn a farm.
Fire.
Yes.
And it was an actual farm this time and not just a moisture farm.
Not just a moisture farm.
But the scary thing about that book, though, is that you see that he has like this, like a close relationship with Galen and his family. They show a little bit of it in Rogue One, like a little scene that's more fleshed out in the book where Jyn is a little girl and her parents are having a meeting with Director Krennic. But that whole book is just, it makes him, a creepy character because he was once a friend to Galen Erso and he just turns on him, in the movie.
Yeah, it's like one of those where you have like a really hard-nosed boss that just, beats everybody down at work, and then you see him at home in his family life. He's a completely different person. And you're like, what? I like the two different angles we get of Krennic in Rogue One. Every interaction he has, not every, but almost every interaction he has is from a person in higher authority to somebody in lower authority, and Krennic is in the lower authority position, right? Mostly with Tarkin. And then we get the one scene with Vader, which is paralleled by the scene with Dedra in the cage where he gets choked out by Vader. And you get those parallels. Whereas in Rogue One, every scene is Krennic is the one in authority and everybody else is below him. And it plays out almost exactly the same. Oh, sorry, Andor. Yeah. I don't know what. Yeah. And so in Andor, he's the one has the power, and he plays it the same way that he gets played in Rogue One when he's the one down the line. And so you get the very much the sense like this is just how, like, we all kind of felt like this is how the Empire ran, but this was very much confirmation on screen that this is how the Empire runs. It's beat downs all down the line. Like the top guy uses threats and manipulation on the next guy, and that person on the next guy, and it just goes all the way down to the folks that run the prison. And in Andor season 1, it's all just bluster and threat and disinfecting cruelty, disinterested cruelty, even to other people that work with. And I do love that we get confidence. I always hate seeing complete incompetence out of bad guys, just because it never makes any actual sense. Like, why would this person be this incompetent? So I was glad we got to see an actual competent Imperial officer out of Krennic, and not just this guy that somehow made it to the top and then did a lot of really dumb things, right? back to back.
Yeah.
So what else about kind of the Rogue One, New Hope, Andor scenescape would you guys want to kind of bring up?
Well, for me, K2SO. We've talked about it on our Andor summaries and discussions, but I think one thing that really struck me when I was watching Rogue One again after seeing Andor was not just the relationship between Cassian and K2, but also seeing, I think because we saw more of K2 in Andor, his death at the end of Rogue One, or death, I guess. I mean, he's a droid, but his end in Rogue One is so much more sad, because he's such a little brat, I mean, a big tall brat and very aggressive and so forth, but he's a brat, and sort of he comes off as very self-centered and just, I mean, he wants to follow orders and all that, but at the same time, he will talk back to you. So the fact that he makes this selfless decision at the end of Rogue One is really all the more bittersweet. So I think that was something that Andor helped me to appreciate even more.
Yeah, I really like that his first line, K2's first line in Andor is hello, and then his very last line in Rogue One is goodbye. Like, I'm really, even though I would have loved to see more of his kind of development of kind of friendship with Cassian and Melshi. So, hopefully there's a book that they come out with, or they announce Andor season, 1.5 or whatever, something like that kind of gives us more, do animated or something. It would be great. But I do like that we kind of get his full circle, like, to quote George Lucas himself, it's like poetry, it rhymes, and they, like, you have these nicely closed loops with all these characters from Andor to Rogue One.
Right, because we get Melshi too, right? We get his story.
Yeah.
From the prison all the way to the beach on Scarif, which is, to me, that's honestly that was an unexpectedly powerful set of moments when, I was rewatching Rogue One for the show, and then they're and I remember him being there, but they're taking off from Yavin, and then I realize he's on the ship and he's talking, and Andor calls him out, Melshi, I need you to do this and this and that. And I'm like, oh yeah, he's there too, man. Like, and the loss of K2, right, is so much bigger and it's funny because he's only there for one arc in Andor season 2, which the showrunner said he didn't want to bring K2 in too early because he didn't want too much of a comedic element in the show, because it's, let's face it, that's what Alan Tudyk does, no matter what show he's in. And so, but we did get at least one arc of him, and it was very powerful. It's funny, one of the most important pieces into K2's like operation or his functioning was the gambling scene, and you have Melshi there, and you have Andor, and it's just this sort of little kind of homey scene that you think about, and then they go off within 48 hours of that, they're on Scarif, and that to me is one of the most interesting pieces, is that the last 3 episodes of Andor and then Rogue One and A New Hope all happen within the same week. It's a very, maybe even less than that. It's a very short timeline that everything has to come together. So it's very much in my mind, the will of the Force kind of really driving home. Yeah, this has to happen now. Like, we don't have any more time to wait. The bad guys built this Death Star thing, and it's going to throw everything way out of balance. We got to take care of it. The other thing I absolutely loved about Andor were the speeches. I don't know if you guys, everybody got a speech pretty much except for Andor, and that was because his speech was in Rogue One, and I absolutely loved the speech. We don't have to read it, but I did write it down.
Yeah,
I did get a couple of speeches though throughout the show, or like maybe not as big or powerful, but like when he, like, maybe not a speech so much as but like when he told Mon Mothma in the last arc, I was there on Gorman, and and throughout the show he had, he had those moments where he would, like, things he said were powerful and would move things along, like his, like he kind of helped inspire Kino Loy to do his speech in One Way Out. Like, I mean, Kino could have done it without him, but Cassian was there to kind of help prod him along, and he had those moments throughout the show, which I really enjoyed, and yeah, of course, they also seeded lines throughout the show of "Welcome to the Rebellion" and "Rebellions are built on hope," both of which were first in Rogue One, so it was nice that they kind of seeded those back throughout the show.
Yeah, so amazing job, I think, overall. I think one of the final things I thought about was at the end of Rogue One, you have not the very end, but when Jin and Andor die on the beach, you have this sort of fade to white and yellow, and it's a very similar color palette that you have at the end of Andor season 2, with supposedly Andor's kid, right? On Mina, or the Mina Rao, which is a farming planet, which is primarily grain. So you have this sort of shot, which is mostly golden and white, that sort of fades, with the same kind of very soft music, and like that struck me. I don't know if they were trying for that or not, but I felt like that was sort of like where Andor's head was kind of at.
Probably because it's even deeper than that. There's in each scene there's a male character and a female character, and in Andor it's the beginning of life, whereas in Rogue One it's the end of life. So for those characters, so yeah, I definitely, I'm sure that they were like, how can we make this as poetic and symbolic as possible? You know? Yeah. I think that also helps with the transition, right, from Rogue One, which is mostly very harsh and painful and difficult to watch, and transitioning into A New Hope, right, with A New Hope. I mean, there's life to pass on from Cassian, into the next generation. And you hope that even though Cassian died, that, his offspring will be able to live beyond all the pain and suffering that he had to, go through. Yeah. So that's definitely, I think, one of the things that helps to make Rogue One a little more sad, but also bearable, I think, for the audience.
Any final thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah. Just the only, I did have another quote that I thought of, which is in Rogue One, which is, I mean, there's a lot we didn't talk about because this is more retrospective on Andor, but the character of Chirrut Imwe, who is the blind staff wielding guy, he had told when because they get imprisoned by Saw Gerrera's crew on Jeddah, when they're trying to meet with Saw to get the intel. He says, Chirrut says, there's more than one sort of prison, and I believe he says something. He says more too, and I'm just imagining, like when you say that now, you can imagine him kind of the prison of his whole life of being, being run down by the Empire on his home, or really the security people on his home planet, but then eventually the Empire itself, the prison, like it's just with the context of Andor, just thinking of all those experiences that he's had and all the things. And, we didn't read the speech, but the speech that he gives in Rogue One, like he's talking about all the things he did in the name of the rebellion. And now, you know what he did, you think back to, Aldhani and the rebellion on Ferrix, the heist of the ship at the start of season 2, and just like everything he's done, you can now think back on and know what he's talking about, which I think is really cool. And then similarly, I already kind of mentioned it, but at the end when Jyn and Andor when Scarif is blowing up, or at least like blowing up enough to kill everyone on it, they, I imagine that Andor is thinking back on his mom, his dad, Brasso, and just everyone else he's lost along the way, and like, hopefully having peace that he'll, be potentially with them in the Force if he has any kind of belief in that. We don't really get a sense that he does, although there's kind of that hint with the Force healer at the end of Andor where he kind of has that knowing look. He sees walking away, and you get the montage of kind of seeing all these characters. So definitely I think watching the last arc of Andor, or all of Andor, and then Rogue One, I think is a really, really cool way to kind of get kind of the full sense of a lot of these characters' stories. So
very good. So yeah, like I said, good job, Disney.
Give us more.
Good. Yeah. More like that. All right, well, I think that's it for this episode of The Secrets of Star Wars. And we want to take a moment to thank our wonderful patrons, including Patrick H., Russell T., Martin P., Hind DP, and James M. Their generous donations help us to create the Secrets of Star Wars and all the shows here at StarQuest. And you can join them at sqpn.com/give. And now we'd like to hear from you, our listeners. What did you think of all of this stuff bundled together? Andor, Rogue One, A New Hope. What was your favorite line that ran through them all? And let us know by sending us an email at starwars@sqpn.com, on our social media pages, or by leaving a comment on our awesome and amazing channel on the StarQuest Discord server, which you can find at sqpn.com/discord. Well, until next time, thank you, Jeff Haecker, for joining us for the Secrets of Star Wars.
Thanks, Pat.
And thank you, Angela Sealana, the Bendu, the one in the middle.
Yeah, thanks. It was nice to be in the middle for this discussion. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And I'm the Dadalorian, Patrick Mason. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy. Vatican II in a Year. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Vatican.